There we go. We are live on here. We'll go ahead and go live on TikTok as well. Okay. We are live on all platforms now. This is Deal Flow Live. I am one of your hosts, Brody Vinson.
I'm Ron Santo.
And this is a show where we break down businesses that are currently for sale and we simply give our opinion of their value. Now, if you're watching on TikTok, I'm going to flip you over to the side here and I'm going to kind of show it so that you can see what we're looking at here. We don't have the TV operating today. And I'm just going to pull up some business listings that are currently for sale. And Ryan and I are going to break down what's going on, whether or not we think it's a good deal, proper valuation, and we're going to see if there's anything that makes sense to buy. And if you're someone who's looking to buy a business, hopefully you can tune in and learn a little bit about the process, what to look for, what to consider, that sort of thing. If you're someone who's looking to sell a business, hopefully you can learn from the other side of it as well and factor that into how you would eventually sell your business. Ryan, what kind of businesses are we looking at today?
So today we're doing something fun. I wanted to look at businesses that are what I call one-offs or super niche, where we see something that's very, very niche down, and everybody likes to say, find your niche. And that's important. For us, it's home services for the most part, predominantly in the HVAC space, electrical, that's pretty much where we've niched it down to. But there is something like too much niche. And I like to call it from Etsy to reality, meaning, this is like an Etsy business is something where it works digitally and there's a market for it and it's trendy. And usually on Etsy, you can transition your shop depending on how trends are moving. If you're physically, though, in the real space and you niche too close to the sun, you can't really pivot out. And as you can see from our first one, this is the case. This is a charcuterie board business. And now, what is your first thought about this, Brody?
We're going to have to tear this listing apart. This is an absurd ask for the amount of money that it's making.
Yeah, and we're going to see some of those nice keywords that people use to drive up businesses in the other spaces as well as we're walking through this. But as we've both looked this one over, there's no leg to stand on here.
No, right off the bat, the thing that I will say about this business is typically when you're evaluating a business, you are looking at how profitable it is, right? You want to know how profitable the actual business is to know whether or not it would be something you want to buy. If you look at this business, they're asking $150,000 for a business that makes $10,000 a year. That would effectively take you 15 years to pay off. It would take you 15 years to become profitable with this business. And it's a charcuterie business. Who's to say that charcuterie boards will even be a viable trend in 15 years? I don't know. They might be totally out of style by then. They might be something that people aren't really doing anymore. And anyway, there are businesses where you can make your money back way quicker than 15 years. So something that's cash flowing $10,000, they do have $25,000 of equipment, $7,000 of inventory. But even if you factor that in, they're still asking for somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 12 times multiple on this business that is making $10,000 a year. So this is the type of thing that you have to be really savvy for. If you're trying to buy a business, you might have heard that charcuterie board companies make really good money, and that is true. But you have to be savvy and not overpay for things like that. And if someone's trying to charge you $150,000 for a business like this, I think that's pretty ridiculous.
I don't know who the agent is on this listing who let them put this up. But
looks like it's not an actual agent.
It's not an agent, probably because no agent would take this one. Mm-hmm. This is here's the thing about, if you look at charcuterie, break it down real quick. There is no skill ceiling to it. Yes, there is a quote skill to it, but it's not something it's not electric. It's not being an electrician. It's not doing bricklaying. It's not a trade. There was a Brody and his lovely girlfriend hosted a gathering at their place, and your girlfriend and I think your sister as well, was it right? Mm-hmm. They made a beautiful charcuterie board, and I think the explanation was, well, we saw it on TikTok and we just followed the TikTok. If it's that easy to do it, most places that do catering and you want a charcuterie board will probably just have somebody go on TikTok and do it, and it'll turn out great. They're not going to have to hire a specialist to make a charcuterie board.
I will push back on that just a little bit. I do have a family friend from growing up that started a charcuterie business, and it's actually a really successful business. But they do it at a much higher level. They do the type of charcuterie boards where they fill like an entire table with the thing. It's like a sea of charcuterie. So they're for like a wedding or like an engagement party or some fancy occasion, like fancy party or something like that. So it's like a much higher echelon. So there are ones that have a lot of success, but on pure financials alone, this is just a ridiculous ask. I don't think charcuterie businesses are a bad business by any means. I actually think you can make a lot of money with them, and it would be a good one to own if they had the right pricing in place. But this one, for $10,000 a year that it's actually profiting and $149,000 to buy it, I mean, that's just absurd. They do say that there's 5 employees. Honestly, for a business with 5 employees to only be making $172,000, that's tight. It's no wonder that it's only making $10,000 a year. Like almost the entire cost is going to labor. So I will say it could be that if you eliminated maybe a couple of the employees here, that it would actually be a decently profitable business to run. They do say that they're absentee owners, which means that they don't actually operate the business.
It means they marked it up even more.
Exactly. So I mean, I would say that it's probably not a good business to buy, though. Their expectations are incredibly out of line.
I'm standing on business here. I drank the haterade this morning. I don't think there's anything about this that's going to be anything worth. There may be meat on that plate, but there's no meat on the bones of this business. And to your point about your friend, I think the reason your friend is so successful is because they did a very good job of presenting themselves as a catering company. Essentially, when you're talking about massive spreads, okay, that's going to feed a lot of people all at once. And I'm sure if I'm having a wedding, I'm going to hire them for the entire pre-meal. They're going to cater it. They're not doing a board. They're doing catering.
That's a great point.
I think I think they took this concept and they understood what this meant, and they were smart enough to turn it to what it needed to be. So I think it's just your person's really smart, probably more than just the trend itself.
No, that's a good point. And I would imagine, I mean, this says one of the things that they do is catering events. I would imagine that this one is probably similar. Clearly it's having some success as far as the revenue. They're doing a decent amount of business. This one is simply a bad deal because of what they're asking, in my opinion, and what they're open to. It's not one that I would want to involve myself in. I think there's a lot better deals to be had out there. And for $150,000, you could probably find yourself anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 worth of cash flow per year.
Easily, yeah. No, you're paying a lot for nothing, unless and if this is your dream, it'll cost you less to start your own. You can probably make better margins starting out on your own.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, you could go pay people. You could pay people to take your business for that much and make the same amount of money almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So charcuterie business, this one, not one to really write home about. Let's move to the next one, though. This one I thought was unique as well. This is an elevator install and maintenance business. If you think about it, I mean, this is what you would definitely call a boring business. It's a very everyday type of business, but this is something that is just going to be needed kind of no matter what. What are your opinions on this, Ryan?
I think there's probably, I don't think I've ever met a person who hasn't had an experience where they've seen an elevator that's been broken. And I think we all know how much that sucks. And especially if you lived in an apartment or you've had to go into any large building, those stairs are not fun. This is the type of business that me and you would hit somebody up on, because it's something where there's it's like the wheel. Nobody's reinventing the elevator, and technicians probably are just recurring. These companies aren't reinventing their systems for the most part, maybe just new safety installs, but nothing a technician can't look at a pamphlet and get himself up to date on. This is a super specific industry with a like it's very necessary to have elevators. And I'd like, as long as you're not asking me 5, 10x, I think that this is a good business for somebody who wants to get involved in something like this. And I'm sure they probably have contracts in place.
So that's the thing I was going to say. One thing I do happen to know about the elevator install and maintenance business, specifically maintenance, is that, if you go into any elevator, there's a little thing that basically shows that it was safety checked on the inside. Almost every
Mhm.
time they're supposed to have it, at least. And they have to pay someone to come out and do those safety checks. So when you have an elevator install and maintenance business, specifically on the maintenance side, a lot of these companies have these ongoing contracts where they just, like, the buildings have to pay them to do that every so often to be legally compliant and having an elevator. So you're almost guaranteed a certain amount of business as long as you can keep those contracts and do a good job and have good pricing.
I feel like elevators and cars are similar. There's different companies that do different ones, and I'm sure there's variations. And maybe there's some sort of certification that you get to work on different companies. So if you have an elevator in a company and you need that specific type of technician and you have your guys certified, that's a lock in your business.
This one's interesting because it's only got one employee, it says. I would imagine that means that the seller, the owner of the business, is doing some of the work, but the employee is probably doing most of the actual maintenance and the installs and things like that. I'm surprised to see that it's only one employee because, the margins aren't that crazy on this one. It's less than 50%. That's good, but it's the margins aren't that crazy. I would imagine maybe there's a lot of materials cost. Maybe they're, purchasing the elevators as well and just marking them up on the install.
Maybe the guy's paid really well too.
The guy could be paid really well. That wouldn't surprise me. This is probably a very specialized type of thing to be doing. So maybe they're paid well over 6 figures to do this, that's kind of cool. I mean, if you can make 6 figures plus installing elevators, the thing with this business is if you were to acquire this with SBA financing, they're asking $705,000. You would need to put down about $75,000, or no, $70,000 to purchase a business like this. The rest you could finance over like 10 years, and your payments would be less than $70,000 a year when you're making $215,000 of cash flow with an employee doing the work. So this is actually a pretty good deal. It's higher than a 3x multiple, somewhere in the middle of a 3 and a 4, but this is a good business. Probably one that I would feel good about owning. It does come with some equipment, about $77,000 worth of equipment, but they probably have a lot of maintenance contracts. If I was trying to buy something like this, I would want to know what the contracts look like. Do they have solid contracts with the buildings that they service? How long have they been around? It says that they've been around, let's see, since 2010. So they passed the smell check there. Ryan and I like to see businesses that have been around for 5, 10 plus years.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one? 2010. I mean, it's been around for a while.
Yeah. I think it passes all the tests. I mean, it's almost a 15-year. Now, Brody, me and you we like to always make our deals very, we like to have we'd like to have plans for our plans, as we like to say. This is one of the ones where, and I want to hear you on this one, where if I were to go and grab this, let's say, or let's just say we go and grab this one, would you say that because this technician is so pivotal, we would go up to him and say, hey, look, you're really important. So important that we want to offer you equity in this business with us to kind of make sure that, number one, he's engaged, but number two, that he's going to help us grow up, because that network that he probably has of tradespeople, probably how we get our second and third employees, and keeps him, happy, and keeps him, working, because maybe him and the guy have a good relationship. How are we going to build that? Give you ownership.
Unless I had an experienced elevator technician looking for work in my back pocket, I would probably do exactly what Ryan said. I would want to lock this person down And if the owner hadn't locked them down somehow already, I would probably, honestly, I would, if they were a decent, trustworthy, cool person that wanted to stay around and work in the business, I would probably be looking to have them come in on the purchase with me, whether that meant bringing capital to the table or whether it meant signing a long-term agreement to stay in the position in exchange for a little bit of equity. You can give someone non-voting, non-controlling shares of equity as well. That's one thing that I've done before in one of my businesses is you can give someone 10% equity on paper, but just write into the operating agreement that they don't have controlling interest. So you still have all voting rights and things like that. Or even if you need to give them more equity than that, could be more about them just having some skin in the game and some ownership for when it sells and for when it makes profits and cash flow. But it also makes them a lot more likely to stick around, and they have ownership in it, and people treat businesses differently when they have ownership in them. You don't quite clock out the same way if you're the owner of a business. You might take that late night text every once in a while or late night call. You might go a little bit above and beyond to do marketing and get more business or network and get more business. So I think it's always a good thing to have someone who has some skin in the game, especially if they're experienced in this and really have been doing it for a long time, just because they could probably bring something to the table that you can't.
Agreed. I think this is a good one. I like where it's at, and I think we're both kind of on the same page of how we'd approach acquiring this one.
So to sum this one back up for anyone who's tuning in, this is an elevator install and maintenance business. It is located in Florida. Actually, I'm not sure if it says where exactly. It just says Florida, which I thought was odd. So I would want to know where exactly. But it's located in Florida. It is doing about $215,000 a year in cash flow, which means that's what it makes in profit after equipment is paid for, after the employee gets their salary. That's what the owner's taking home every year. And they're asking $705,000 for it. So if you were to finance this over a good amount of time, this passes the finance check from our perspective. If you're making double what it takes to pay the debt that you financed a business with or more per year, they say you're in pretty good territory. Gives you room for a margin of error, and maybe even allows you to pay the business off a little bit more quickly than you expected to, and then get into just making cake on top of cake. So this is, as opposed to the charcuterie business we looked at before, this is one that I like a lot, that I would actually consider.
Sure.
So the next one we've got is a little bit more unique. This is a consulting business. Ryan, what are your initial thoughts on this? I'm going to show it here a little bit, zoom in.
Well, we've had this conversation before about, how people have, the word consulting has kind of gotten a mixed connotations nowadays. So to me, it's always kind of, when I see somebody selling a consulting business, I'm always a little skeptical. And my other thing is, what is your niche that you're selling consulting on? Because consulting, and
it does get into that a little bit,
is your own expertise, your abilities in an area to provide value. If you're buying a firm, do you know enough to provide value? Are they going to leave people with the value to prop you? And are those people going to want to stay with you? Because if a consulting firm is only as good as the people doing the consulting, what's to stop them from leaving, starting their own firm?
Let's dig into it a little bit.
Please.
So in the business description, like Ryan said, consulting is a very broad thing. It's really important that we look at what it's actually doing. So it looks like they do VoIP phone service. That's voice over IP. Very important stuff. That's like your call forwarding type stuff when you call a small business or something. So that helps people be able to take in more calls and route them the right way and stuff like that. They do CRM and cloud-based software. Any small business needs stuff like that if they're trying to grow. So, it sounds like it's very much just like a software / tech-led kind of IT company. I would call this more of an IT business than a consulting business, to be honest.
Yeah, because I feel like there's a sales portion to it, more of a sales-heavy thing. You're just kind of helping them with their own software. So this probably falls more in line with SaaS.
Yeah, it depends on how the CRMs work and that sort of thing. it doesn't sound like they're making recurring revenue and stuff
Mm.
from the software necessarily, but it sounds like they probably do a lot of like installs of technology for different businesses. Um, they talk in here about some legal stuff. This sounds like that's their niche. So they're okay. Here we go. They're a prison consulting group. That's very interesting. Not a law firm. They're a prison consulting group. Our main focus is to educate and prepare defendants going into federal or state prisons and work with them as well as inmates already in prison to reduce their sentence. Well, this is a very interesting business, actually. That no wonder this was in the miscellaneous section.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how you'd classify this.
There are 209 federal prisons, and we've had clients in all of them. There are also 1,700 state and county prisons, and we've serviced many of them. What an interesting business.
Yeah, and
this is a niche.
That's a very underserved market, I'm sure.
Yeah. So to catch you guys up that are tuning in, this is a consulting business where they teach people that are going to prison or are already in prison how to reduce their sentence. So tons of people that probably feel underrepresented. This is a way for them to be a little bit more represented. Let's take a look at the numbers though. So we'll start off with how many years it's been in business. It's been around since 2008. So this business again passes the age check. Mm-hmm. We're looking for 5 to 10 years plus. It's been around for almost 20 years, going on 20 years here. 3 employees, so people are kind of running it that are already in there and know what they're doing. It's a work from home type of business, which is very appealing to a lot of people. Now, to talk about the financials, they're asking almost $1.5 million for this, and it is doing $361,000 a year in cash flow. So it's a little bit of a premium multiple. They are asking, let's do the numbers on that real quick, actually. It might not be quite as much as I'm making it out to be, but based on the numbers, it is doing about that much. So this is doing 361,902 in cash flow. Yeah, so this is just over a 4 times multiple for this business. It's a little high for something doing less than $500,000 in cash flow, if I'm being honest. Although we do often see very IT-based businesses and things that border on SaaS. Mm-hmm. We do often see those go for a little bit higher. Yeah. So that doesn't surprise me too much. I would say it really depends a lot on what the state of the employees are in the business. If they really are doing everything in the business, then you've kind of got something here. If one of them is serving as the salesperson, that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And if they have a really proven way to get new customers and clients, that's pretty good. It looks like a lot of their referrals come from attorneys, newly indicted defendants of white collar crimes. Buying this business could just be a great way to learn how to commit white collar crimes. What do you think of that angle?
Well, I'm certainly interested. Yeah, I mean,
look at him. Does he not look like he would commit a white collar crime?
Please don't ask people that. I don't like the answers. If I'm going to jail, I'm going in a Jimmy Buffett t-shirt. Rest in peace, legend. You're paying for what could theoretically be a stranglehold on a niche market. Because I didn't even realize this was a thing. I thought you just went to jail and hoped for the best. That was I would have never guessed. But I think you're doing a lot of sales calls to attorneys, defense attorneys, trying to get probably, maybe even ones that do state-sponsored stuff, because, a lot of people go to jail who maybe don't have the ability to get a regular attorney. And I guess it'd be silly to get recurring revenue. Because you're only needing this case, no pun intended, case-by-case basis. But
hey, how long is the sentence?
Yeah, that's kind of the question.
How many cigarette packs do they have to pay you in?
Yeah, truthfully, yeah. How many credits you got?
Yeah, how much of that $361,000 in cash flow do you think is made up of cigarette
Oh,
packs.
minimum like a third. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's a lot of
So
Marlboros coming through there.
you do have to be willing to accept payment in that. Okay, let's see. We got a question here. So we've got Aunt Armin who is asking, would those employees stay on in management after the acquisition or be replaced? And my answer to you with that is that it depends on who you are as the buyer and what your plans are. But if you're someone who's buying a business that has employees that have been there for a while, I think, in my opinion at least, unless there's something really wrong with those employees, you don't think they're going to do a good job or you're not going to be able to deal with them. Or if you have employees in your back pocket ready to start that you think are genuinely going to do a better job, in my opinion, you should definitely try to keep those employees on, and you should certainly try to have them manage the business as much as possible. If you can have them operate it, even better, because you got to think about opportunity cost. If you buy a business like this and you all of a sudden have to be the sole manager and operator, and you're the one that's responsible for everything, then you can't use your time to do other business things. And depending on what your goals are, that might be fine. It might be that you want to run this business full time, and $361,000 in cash flow to run a business is a really good deal. Honestly, like that's a lot of income to take home as a sole person running a business. So that could be, I mean, you could make a really, really great living on that and be running it from your laptop from the sounds of it.
You could take half that, start hitting your loan that much harder, really reduce your monthlies on that just out of that first year. And to that point about the employees, I mean, the thing we always say is you're buying a business, you're not buying people. So there's, and every time you do a transaction, there's always a chance that everybody just, that nobody wants to work for you for whatever reason, or there's always that chance in anything in life. Honestly, when we look at business with employees, we always say, okay, we try to get a gauge on the employees, the compensation, the general feeling of the employees with the business. Most times people stay on because jobs are difficult to find, and if they're making good money and you're somebody who's reasonable and you're taking over, most people will say, okay, I'll stick around and see how this guy is. So usually you always want to get a gauge on that. And if you find that this is a very tight-knit company with a lot of people who are endeared to the owner, it's always good to get the owner kind of bring you in, like with that 2-week training. Even, if the owner offers to stay on for a bit more.
They do state in the kind of the bottom of here that they're willing to hold up to 10% of the business. I wanted to point that out too, because
that's important.
That's a really important thing. I've lost track of how many times I've brought this up and said this on this show, but there's one particular person that I've talked to and interviewed on my YouTube that buys businesses as like a serial thing. She came from the private equity world, has bought a bunch of businesses of her own, kind of manages a portfolio of them. She will not buy a business that she can't keep, she will not buy a business where the owner is unwilling to hold 5 to 10% of the business, like at least for a long period of time, but I think usually indefinitely. And the reason for that is it's what one of my business partners calls it schmuck insurance. It's, it's your insurance to make sure that everything is what they said it is. They're on the line for it. They're only going to get that 10% if they make sure everything is running smoothly. And they're kind of liable as a partner that way, and they have skin in the game. And the more that they have skin in the game, the more, like, if you have a little question that comes up or something, they're going to be a little bit more likely to answer that question, make sure that everything's running right. Other thing I'll say about this business is, even if you didn't have them do that 10%, if you were able to get SBA financing for something like this, I ran the numbers on that, 361 in cash flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can figure out how to maybe go pull it from an investor, or maybe if you have the money somehow from saving it up or some other means, if you could figure out how to put 148,000 down on this business or so, 10% of it through the SBA, that would leave you with obviously about, 100 or what, a little over $1 million, still like 1.2 something, whatever it comes out to be, to pay off. But you'd be paying that over the course of like 10 years, and your yearly payment on that with 11% interest through the SBA, kind of estimating it to be there, would be about 148,000 per year in payments for 361 in cash flow. So if we take, 361 off of that, 361, 902, that's leaving you with about $214,000 in cash flow after paying for your debt and paying for all the employees and all of that. That's a really damn good deal.
And that's on the assumption that the number stays the same. There's no change. You don't make more, you don't make less. So ideally, you'd be making more money over time. So you'd be making probably more as long as things trended up. So that's just the baseline, which is great.
Yeah. And what I would say here is I would really aim to, if I was buying this business, I would absolutely only buy it if the owner did stay on with that 10%, especially for something like consulting like that. Like you really need to make sure that you continue to have access to that knowledge base and like what they're actually consulting on and have time to properly get it transitioned. They say 2 months is enough to get it transitioned. People will always say, 2 weeks is enough to get it transitioned. I call bullshit on all of that personally, unless the owner has actually taken time to like go into extreme detail about what every single procedure is throughout the entire business, has it documented in little manuals. I still, even if they were at that point, I still don't think 2 weeks or maybe even 2 months is enough time to fully transition something like a business that's been around since 2008. There's a lot of knowledge and like inherent knowledge built into there that you need to know as the new owner. So having someone on indefinitely with 10% that's responsible for answering those questions and being a little bit available, it's a really big deal.
Yeah. You don't want to mess around at this price point with this amount of money. It's not simple, especially with such a specific legal adjacent practice.
Agreed. All that being said, though, I will say they also state that there's the option for, if you could see in here, they also say there's seller financing available. So you could potentially get partially SBA loan for this business and then also have some seller financing throughout it. Another thing, same way the 10% works, having them hold that indefinitely, the seller financing can keep them a little bit on the hook to provide that information too, because they're not going to get their whole purchase price all at once. They're only going to get all of it if they do live up to being able to deliver on everything that, you put in the purchase agreement. So I think all in all, this is a business I like. It's a little expensive, but it sounds like a really good business that's got, like Ryan put it, probably a kind of a stranglehold on that niche.
This is incredible. I think it's a really great service they're providing because not everybody, I think this is a good service for people, beyond white collar crimes. I think this is a great idea. And if somebody's been doing this for we're coming up on 16 years now, they've clearly had a lot of success and you're funneling a pipeline of people into it. So I think if you can make this work, and hell, if you even have some legal training, you're probably going to do very well in this space.
Yeah. So final opinion on this, my final opinion at least, is if I was trying to buy a business, this is a business I would want to buy, especially if I was looking to really maintain my autonomy, if I'm looking to have location freedom, be able to bounce around a little bit and enjoy myself and just work from my laptop. For the most part, this is a business I would really like to have. Ryan, what's your final opinion here?
I definitely wasn't, sold on it at first because consulting gives me the little bit of a goosebumps, but I feel like with what they're doing and how they're doing it, and just, like you said, the time under, I guess we'll use an exercise thing, time under tension, just like when building muscle, they've done the reps and they've clearly built something good. And you can command that little bit of extra a price on that, especially when it's remote and functioning like a well-oiled machine. As long as the financials look good and as long as everybody on the inside is happy, I think you have a lot of potential for scaling, most importantly. But I like it. I was skeptical, but I really think based on what they said, this is a good idea.
I think so too. I think we'll end it there on a positive note. We looked at a couple different businesses today, kind of the stray dogs per se, the random miscellaneous businesses that don't fit squarely into a particular category. And I think this was a really fun one. It was a lot of unique stuff.
Yeah.
I learned a lot today.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we learned that you can do charcuterie well. You just have to be smart about it. And we also learned that elevator technicians are probably one of the most slept on industries that we've seen so far.
And most importantly, we learned that if you are committing white collar crimes, there is good incentive for you to continue doing so, because there's people out there working hard to make sure that you know how to get out of them after you get sent to prison.
Yeah. Remember, taxes are suggestions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
not financial advice.
Not financial advice, not legal advice, not tax advice. All of that being said, though, this has been Deal Flow Live. I've been one of your hosts, Brody Vinson.
I've been Ryan Santo.
And I'm going to answer this one last question
before
we go. Is exit strategy to sell upon repaying debt and realize IRR like traditional leverage buyout, or hold to some goal? That's a great question. With a business like this, I think the only way you can answer that is by understanding who's buying it. You know, if we were buying it, we would probably have the goal of selling it eventually. To be honest, our goal would probably be to look to see if there's some kind of strategic advantage, maybe some kind of marketing system that is a very low hanging fruit that we could easily bring to it, that would grow it a lot quicker than it has grown, or some kind of technology that could scale it quicker than it has scaled. If there's something we could bring to it that we think could grow it a little bit, we'd try to grow it while paying off the debt. And then honestly, yeah, as soon as the debt was paid off, an SBA loan is a 10-year loan, but there are ways, like, you're allowed to pay it off early. So we would look to pay it off early as possible. Probably we wouldn't look to take probably much of that 361 in cash flow. We would probably take just what we need to pay our bills and live a decent lifestyle, and try to pay off the debt as quickly as possible while growing the business. And then honestly, as soon as it's paid off, we would try to probably sell it.
For sure. This is not I think if somebody really was passionate about this in their situation, yeah, you hold on to it, you keep doing it. But I think the way that we look at most of these businesses, if not all of them, is that we look to scale up, pay our debt, pay our bills, but then exit out as the largest multiple. And that's how we go into this also. Another way to put it is we're targeting multiples for our exits. So we're looking to say, what do we need to cash flow? What do we need to gross? What do we need our EBITDA to look like for us to get the amount of money that we want? And we're perfectly willing to put some stuff on the back burner short term to get that real long-term payout. So yes, that is our goal with most of these, is to get out for a multiple, while also making sure that we're targeting the right purchaser who is going to be able to take this and continue moving it forward. We're not just selling to anybody, we're selling to the right people.
And thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate you. Thank you for asking questions, for tuning in, for engaging a little bit. And again, this has been Deal Flow Live. Ryan and I do this every Tuesday night, right around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in next time for probably a new industry. We like to hop around to different industries, give some coverage of all types of things. Next week in particular,
next week in particular, we have a very special show that I'm very excited about.
That's one more after, right? Stay tuned. Just watch it.
We've got something happen
very
next
special
week
planned for the next couple weeks. But again, this has been Deal Flow Live. I'm Brody Vinson.
I'm Ryan.
Thanks for tuning in. Nice. And we are